Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives, or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Janina shares with us her two waterbirth stories, one long and one short. Her story highlights how different each birth can be. She needs to work with her fear of the pain and ultimately harnesses the power of her mind both times. Janina shares some great wisdom about getting clear on what your non-negotiables are so you can communicate that to your supporters and health professionals on the day. This type of mental preparation goes a long way in getting the support that we need in birth. Another wisdom-filled episode. Enjoy.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching, and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Yep, sure.
Welcome, everybody, to the Transform Your Birth podcast. With me today is the lovely Janina, who's had 2 little boys. Lenny's 5 and Freddie's 19 months. And I love hearing birth stories when women have had 2 births or more, because each birth teaches us so much. So welcome, Janina. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Now, when you were pregnant with little Lenny, that was 5 years ago, what was your overall impression of birth? You know, how were you feeling about the idea of giving birth? And then what sort of preparation did you do?
So I think with Lenny, I went into it probably a little bit naively. I didn't really know what to expect. I knew I wanted to try to give birth, without intervention or too much intervention, if possible. So I sort of knew what I wanted, but at the same time, I didn't really know what to expect either. I think that was the main.
And then what sort of preparation did you do?
So I did a few classes at the hospital, and they were good from a practical perspective. I think we met, we meeting people in the same situation, with sort of the same, perhaps anxieties or things that people wanted to talk about together in a safe space. So that was really good. But I felt like I wanted a little bit more from more tools for my mental state when it actually came to giving birth, which is why I had heard about your course, the Transform Your Birth course, and I wanted to give that a go. So I did that with my husband, and I think doing that together equipped us really well to give us those tools, and in preparation and then also for the actual birth. So it helped a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The the mindset piece is often the missing piece when it comes to talking about birth in hospital settings in the hospital classes. And I've always asked the question, what is it that moves the needle in birth? And the mindset, I'd say that and breathing are at the top of the list. And then having tools to find comfort is really, really important to learn those tools. And sometimes they can give you some of those tools and sometimes they don't. So it does help to do some extra preparation because it really can change things on the day. So with the preparation, how did you go with the practices, Janina? Do you remember how they influenced your mindset, the audio tracks that I get people to practice?
Yeah, I do. So I practiced as often as I could, and I felt it really did. It really did help in sort of manifesting that trust in myself. So I think, together with, I also was doing yoga up until pretty close to the birth, and I think that combination, and I was trying to walk as much as I could as well, and just trying to sort of stay as healthy as I could, together with that sort of mindset, and trying to sort of trust in the process, trust in myself, that that yeah, I think the messaging, one of the really important messages that I got out of your course was the being able to accept that this is what's meant to happen, and it's this is what's meant to happen, and it's trusting my body that it can do it.
Yeah, stepping into a space of accepting the process, very, very important, and the belief that our bodies can do it. And it doesn't take a stretch to believe that your body can do it, because here's the good thing about that is birth is not something you do. So therefore, when we feel like it's something we have to do, then it can cause our mind to really doubt ourselves as to whether we can do it. Birth is not something you do. Birth is something you allow to happen. And it's in the allowing it to happen that the body does what it's wired to do. The birth process is wired in your autonomic nervous system. So there's nothing to do. Your job is to get out of the way. And the best way to get out of the way is to relax. And that's really working on that. And then things in your mind that could stop you from relaxing. So they are fears and worries, doubts, concerns. That's part of what shifts women into that place of belief, because they realize at that point, oh, there's nothing to do. I just have to let it happen.
Yeah.
And of course, a great metaphor for that is women in comas. Coma woman can do it. Coma woman can do it. She doesn't have to do anything. Even women in comas can give birth, because even the pushing is a reflex in the vagina. It's an ejection reflex. So it's all wired in there. There's nothing to do at all. So going through that process supported your belief. How did your partner experience the preparation, and what sort of shifts did you notice in him?
So I think he was really, really great. It gave him a lot of tools for the actual birth, as well. So I think he was, it really helped him support me in a way that I needed to, and he sort of could be in tune with me a lot more. So, and he tried to really create, when it was sort of not in the active labor phase yet, that I had quite a long first birth, and there was a long period of time where it was not active labor, and he was really trying to help create that sort of safe space, as calm as possible. He lit candles, he changed the lighting for me, and just sort of let me, help me eat when I needed to eat.
Nice.
All of those kinds of things. So yeah, I think sort of being in tune and having the knowledge behind the different phases and
Yeah.
what might be needed was
Mm.
really good. Yeah.
Mm. So I bet he was looking pretty attractive on the day, was he? Because he knew what he was doing. I always say to them, I'm going to make you look real shiny. So tell us, how did your first birth unfold, Janina?
So like I mentioned, it was quite long. So I think overall it went over about 3 days.
Yeah.
And my midwife came and, helped hurry things along a little bit. And then once active labor hit, it was really intense. So it sort of went from this very long, tiring couple of days, not knowing when it was really going to unfold more actively, to yes, hitting all of a sudden, my waters broke, and it just it just was really intense. And then in
Can I just,
hospital.
sorry to interrupt you,
Mhm.
Janina, can I just, when people hear things like it was 3 days, that's the sort of thing that make people go, what, 3 days of labour? But when you describe that, it's contractions and then a space. So what was a lot of your labour in early labour? What sort of breaks did you have? The idea that it could go for that long can be, quite fear-inducing.
Yes,
What?
sorry.
Yeah, no, but this is part of what women can experience. So that's why I want to just remind them that that's not 3 days of like contractions the whole time. That is contraction, break, and pacing yourself is really important. So what did that early labor look like?
So the early labor was, the terminology now, is it losing the mucus plug?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So I lost the mucus plug, and that was sort of, I think, one of the first, if I remember correctly, one of the first things to happen. And then I think I had the cramping. I had sort of basically like period cramps
Yeah.
that kept coming on and off, but they didn't get much worse, or they didn't progress from there. So it was sort of this cramping, and I think I just felt really sort of heavy. So he was obviously sort of pushing further down the baby. Um, so I think in those 2 days I spent as much time as I could walking, or I had like a big bouncy ball that I sort of went on, and I just tried to sort of keep doing normal things. Like I knew obviously things weren't far away, but as much as possible, I just I even like went walked to the nearest shops and back again, and and my husband came with me on that walk, and we just sort of chatted, and so I was still able to do relatively normal things.
And what were
And
the spaces between a lot of those contractions mostly? You probably don't even know.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, to be honest, I don't. I don't know. I do know what then. So the first, that was about I think a day and a half, and then the evening of the second day, that's when my midwife came, um, and she checked how far along I was, and basically that evening things got a lot more intense, and then it got to midnight, and I actually thought I was going to go to hospital. So we had packed our bag, because it had progressed basically the furthest it had been in those couple of days. And all of a sudden, though, we had the bag packed, and all of a sudden the contractions just stopped.
Wow.
And or not didn't stop, but had slowed down considerably to what they had been again. And I was sort of back to almost where I felt I was in the first couple of days. And that was, I think, where your course really, really helped me, because I was a bit frustrated at that point, because I just thought, gosh, like I thought we were
game on.
We were doing this was happening.
Yeah.
And now it's stopped again. And what I then did was I jumped into the shower. I went into the shower. So my husband had put up candles, dim lighting.
Lovely.
In the shower, and I had a chair in there, and I just went in, and I actually I never really thought of myself as somebody who would do this, but I was actually talking to Lenny, so my son, in the belly, and I just said, I just accepted that where I was at that point in the journey, and I just sort of went, okay, if you need a break, that's fine. We're just going to sit here. We're going to have a bit of a break, if this is what you need. And yeah, I just sort of had a bit of a chat with him. And then
just
came
come
out.
in there, Janina. Sorry, I think this is a point worth making, and it's something that I've heard a midwife, professor of midwifery, actually talk about, which is pauses in labour where the contractions can stop. Now, if you're in a hospital, they might think that, oh, well, we need to push it along, and they might do what's called augmentation, where they give you some synthetic oxytocin to keep those contractions happening. But actually, when you don't disturb birth, you start to see that it's quite common for labours to slow down, and sometimes those contractions even stop. Now, it's easy to think, well, there's something wrong, when in fact, no, this is the journey of your labour. And of course, babies are potentially going to stop pushing on the door and want to have a little bit of a rest and a bit of a sleep. So we don't have to pathologise something as normal as contractions stopping, but there can also be other reasons why that happens. So it's not always clear cut. But to have a pause like that in labour is very normal. How did you manage? So you said my course helped you to manage that, the mindset around that, because it would have been very, very easy to think something's wrong. What am I doing wrong? What should we be doing instead? And continue to do labour rather than just what you did, Janina, which was hop in the shower on a chair, talk to little Lenny and say, okay, darling, if you need a break, I'm good with this. Do you know why and how you're able to flip that mindset there?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think it was just the whole, okay, trust in the process. If this is what needs to happen, I guess this is what needs to happen.
Nice.
And I think I remembered a bit in the course around, if this sort of thing happens, what can help is to change scenery.
Yeah.
So I had been up until that point in the living room, and I had sort of been standing, head over my belly, sort of like forward facing, doing lots of kind of counting and stomping my feet, I think. And yeah, and I just thought, okay, maybe I just need to do something different. Let's try going into the shower. So yeah, and I think it was not necessarily, the effect that it had was to calm me down. And what it allowed me then to do was, when I came out of the shower, I actually had a sleep. So I thought, okay, well, look, if the contractions have pretty much gone, I might as well try and rest, because it's been a big couple of days.
Yeah.
So I went to sleep, but it wasn't necessarily, that was not necessarily my aim with getting into the shower. It was more that I think my thought process there was, let's change the scenery,
Yeah.
because it might help.
Yeah. And then you
And
were
then
able to accept it. And that's, that intuitive wisdom was inside of you as you did that, of like, oh, well, if this is the way it is, this is the way it is. It's that letting go, which is what labour just demands of us all the time. So you had a little sleep. What happened after that?
So then I woke up, and I think it was about 5:30. So it wasn't a really long sleep, but it would have been around 5:30, and I woke up with really, the contractions had basically ramped up again. So I woke up with I suppose with really bad cramping, and I just thought, oh, okay, maybe this is I think this might be happening now, or coming back on. And so and I went to the bathroom, and my waters broke, and that basically, right after my waters broke, it was game on. Like
it can do that, because that brings the baby's head more firmly down on the cervix, and it's the pressure of baby's head on the cervix which generates the oxytocin. More pressure, more oxytocin, more intense the contractions. So it was game on.
Yes, so my husband called my midwife and said, we're coming in. And then it was, I think he was born around 10 o'clock or so, 9 o'clock. I can't remember exactly now, but the pushing took a long time in the end. So I pushed for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Being a first birth, I've been told that that's relatively normal.
Yeah.
But it was, I think especially after the 2 full days before that, it was very tiring.
And labour's like what Janina's describing, where there's a lot of early labour, and can be very disheartening. But I like to remind people that every contraction is contributing to the final outcome. So if you have a labour that starts and stops or goes on for a couple of days, your job is to really pace yourself and do your best to sleep between contractions, do your best to rest, have some active time during the day, and then at night time try to sleep between the contractions and set yourself up so you can be very comfortable, reminding yourself that even though you might be having a longer labour, it's all contributing to the final outcome. There'll be less work to do on the day. So obviously once your waters finally broke, that really brought it on. And it was only a few hours later he was born. So when it comes to opening of the doorway, which is the cervical opening, whatever it's taken you to do the first few centimetres has absolutely no bearing on what it'll take you to do the rest. So, and there's a lot of forces at play around that. So it's good not to get into the mindset that 1 centimetre per hour should be happening. It may not work that way. It just depends on the baby and positioning and what you're doing and a lot of other things. So yeah, that's interesting. And when you met little Lenny, what was that like?
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was a water birth in the end. So I was in the bathtub at the hospital, and not something I really had planned. I was open to the idea, but it was not something. And I think it was just something that the midwives at the hospital, because I had been pushing, and they thought that, and I was already tired from the last couple of days, they thought the bathtub might be a good place for me to be. It really was. It was just, I mean, look, as soothing as a as a bathtub can be in that sort of situation. But it was it was just nice to have and my husband had I think cold washes for my face, and so I don't know, I sort of felt Like it was really, yeah, it was. I don't think I had a vision of how it was all going to unfold. It was really, really incredible holding him, and there was a lot going on. I think it took me a little bit to come down from
Yeah.
all of that. So I think because they got me out of the bathtub and I had to get some stitches, and so I was lying on the bed, and they had to, they put him um, they got him to sort of have the first feed while I was getting stitches,
Right.
because they said it's actually like while I've still got all the chemicals
The
flowing,
hormones. Yeah.
like it's it's good because I won't be focusing on on what's happening with the stitches.
Yeah.
But it was a lot to take in because I
Yeah.
just, yeah, I
Both
had a lot of
ends,
people.
darling.
I don't, yeah, a lot of people around me. I had, this baby that I was just seeing for the first time, and yeah, but it was really, really special.
Beautiful.
And I think, yeah, I still have really fond memories of we got um, we got to just be together as the three of us with lots of skin on skin, um, and really just enjoy those first couple of hours,
Yeah.
really bonding, and yeah, it was very special.
Oh, lovely. So then, a few years later, number 2 comes along. How are you feeling in your pregnancy, with your second pregnancy?
So my second pregnancy was challenging. I had uh, had a miscarriage just before being then pregnant with Freddie, and then we also found out at the 12-week scan that we had to do some extra testing with Freddie. So we didn't get the all clear until about 20 weeks
Oh, wow.
of, when I was pregnant, 20 weeks with him. So it took me, I think there was sort of quite a bit of anxiety around him being healthy. Um, and then I think because of that anxiety, I had a lot of, when I then thought about the birth, for some reason, which surprised me, I had anxiety around the pain as well. And I remembered that last bit of the first birth with Freddie being really intense, and the contractions just being one after the other without much break in between. And then the, yeah, sort of the fear of that happening again. Um, so yeah, I had a sort of a few things to work on mentally, I think, and which is why I then decided I needed to come back to you and do a refresher of your course, which was, yeah, I think that made all the difference. I was able to, when it then actually came to the birth, I had a really clear mindset again. And I was able to just go back to those principles of trusting, trusting the process, trusting my body, that it's done it before, it can do it again. And I think having had chats with my midwife, who I also had supporting me for the first birth, that continuity was really helpful.
Yeah.
And she, she sort of gave me also a bit of confidence that not every, like each birth is different,
Yeah.
and it'll unfold in its own way. And I think, yeah, I think going sort of back to that, and then listening to the tapes or the recordings that you provided, it was, it sort of brought me back again to
right.
knowing that I
So
could go through it.
Yeah. So when you're having your second baby, you don't have ignorance. You know what you're in for. And it's interesting, isn't it? That part of your first birth kind of started to play out as a fear for your second. So it's not like, even though you had a beautiful, straightforward first birth, and even when I was having my fourth birth after having 3 amazing experiences, although not always straightforward, but you'd think that you wouldn't have any fear, but actually you do, and they're often different fears. So you were able to flip that fear of pain, which was a very real experience for baby number 1, in your preparation for baby number 2. Do you know what made the biggest difference to you being able to let go of that fear? Was it the audio tracks, the continuity with your midwife?
Probably a combination.
Mm.
A combination of things. So I had a lot of I had a bit of support. I actually had perinatal depression for a part of that pregnancy, and so I had some mental health support.
Right.
And that, so I think the combination of having that together with the midwife, who I knew so well already as well, and then doing, going back to your course, and I think I had a really strong support network
Right.
around me, and and I think with my husband, who was obviously along for the journey, and he was very supportive of everything I wanted, and chose along the way as well. So I think the support network around me was really key.
That's nice. Yeah, we all deserve that when we're having a baby. And we don't always have it in our families or people close to us. Sometimes we have to look at getting it professionally or externally. So that's really good. How did little Freddie's birth unfold? What had happened?
So his birth, in the end, was actually, I really didn't need to worry at all. It was very quick, and definitely compared to Lenny's birth. So with him, he was over a week, overdue. I know it's sort of past the, what do we say, past the due date.
Yeah.
And so sort of we had, we're waiting for him. But when it happened and when it came on, it was it all unfolded very quickly. Again, it was in the evening, and when I knew that it was happening, I actually put myself to bed, because based on the first birth, I was like, well, I don't know, this could just be the start of a longer process. So I put myself to bed, but I was listening to your recordings, and I pretty much listened to them for about almost 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I tried to I had my eyes closed. I was lying on my side in bed, and I just sort of let it all kind of seep in, and try to, tell myself all those messages that I could do this, and that I was still staying calm the whole time. And then I think when it got to almost 2 hours, the contractions had become so intense that I had to get up, and I just went, okay, I can no longer lie down. This is getting quite active. So then I went downstairs, my husband had actually been, I think he was watching something or on TV or maybe listening to something on his phone. I can't remember. But he had been on the couch and he was actually about to turn the TV off to go to bed. And I said to him, sorry, but that's not going to happen. Yes, his baby's coming
He
very
might have
soon.
made different choices had he have known what was going on upstairs. Gone to bed himself.
Yeah, although I did tell him, I kind of jokingly, I said, I told you you should have gone to sleep. So yeah, so he then, obviously stayed up. I think he might have prepped, I said to him, I think maybe something along the lines of make sure our bags are ready. And then so I think it was an hour and a half later, we called our friend who had said he could come because we had Lenny at home,
of course,
who needed looking after. So while we were in hospital, so we called our friend to come over, and then I got to hospital, and I think 8 minutes later, Freddie was born.
Oh, Jesus. How long was it in its entirety then?
It would have, I think it started at about 7 in the evening, and then he was born, I think, at 2 in the morning.
Wow. Yeah, nice.
Around 2 or 3. Yeah, so and 7 was sort of when the first, when it first started.
Yeah. Interesting. That's what's always surprising. No, like my auntie had 15 children, and she said every one of her births was different. So you just don't know what each one's going to deliver.
Yeah, and with the pushing, I think with Freddie, I ended up pushing maybe 20 minutes or something. So compared to an hour and a half,
yeah,
I was not pushing very, very long at all with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what did you learn about yourself, Janina?
Just, I think, to go with the moment, and accept it for what it is. I think the biggest thing I learned about myself personally was probably trusting trust in myself and my and my body, and knowing that it can do pretty amazing things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And what sort of wisdom would you share with a person about to go through this process?
I would probably say know your non-negotiables,
Okay.
and try and sort of be aware of things that you really care about, that you'd really want to have happen. But then also allow for things, the unexpected to happen, and just know that it's part of what's meant to happen, or part of the process, and accepting and being accepting of that. And if things, do go down a track of needing intervention or anything like that, I think it's again, it's something that might not be in our control, but we can move along with what's unfolding. um, and be sort of empowered to, you know, making choices or making decisions that might help things move along in whatever direction that might be.
Yeah.
And that might be needed.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So what you're describing there is the need to understand the process, understand and be able to read the situation, to get really clear on what's important to you, what your not negotiables are. Can you say a little bit on what yours were? What were your not negotiables?
So I suppose one of the things I wanted to, going back to the difference between, you know, after the first birth, going into the second birth, what was really important to me was I wanted to feel like I was, one, being heard, and that I would be listened to, because I felt with the really intense contractions, one after the other in the first birth, I felt a bit out of control, like I didn't have much control over the situation, and it just happened so quickly.
Yeah.
And I sort of had wondered whether I would have maybe benefited from some gas or, you know, just something to kind of break up that intensity a little bit.
Yeah.
But I had felt a bit disempowered, I think, in the situation, because I couldn't, because it was going from one contraction to the next.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I could really voice what I needed or wanted in that moment.
Right.
And so I made sure for Freddie's birth that that I had Brian on my side to say, you know, and I let him know, if things get really intense, can you, you know, what did I, trying to remember how, but if I need gas, or if I'm saying I need, you know, I need something to ease pain or whatever, that he would then help me get whatever I needed.
Yeah. So to tune in more, if he could see that you're having trouble communicating.
Yeah, that's right.
Potentially not be able to express your needs. Sometimes labours can get a bit fierce like that, and it typically happens at around transition, generally not for too long, but that's when you've just got to hang on, you know, and the problem is you can't get off the bus, which is a terrible thing at the time. But what it does, though, is it helps you to crack through on what you think you can do to what you actually can do. And Mother Nature has a vested interest in you being able to discover what you can do, because your baby's going to demand that of you. Just when you don't think you can get up to the baby again at night, and you do, you have to keep going. And labour's a bit symbolic of the journey on the other side. So it was great that Janina, in that situation, was able to recognise where she didn't feel heard, and to make a real point of it with her next birth, to make sure people were really tuning in to that. And if they could see that she's not communicating, potentially draw out of her what it is that she needs. So a woman's voice should always be heard in labour. I think that's really, really important. In fact, often when I've worked with women who've had traumatic births, difficult births that they're having to heal from, it's not even the complexity that can really bring them unstuck. It's the not feeling heard, safe, or respected, having too much happening without people caring for the emotional state of the mother. So what you're touching on there is really, really important. Janina, your stories highlight beautifully just how different each birth can be. They were both water births ultimately, but very, very different journey to getting to that point. And doing the work of preparation, getting the tools, getting partners on board, recognizing the things you've got to overcome in your own mindset around fears, doubts, worries. Even with Janina's second birth, she had to overcome her fear of the pain for second time round. It's all part of the work that we need to do, the inner work that we need to do as humans evolving. And when you have a baby and you become a parent, your evolution gets put on turbo charge for a little while because the growth curve is just so intense and so huge. But it's a very ripe time for growth and beautiful things to unfold as you transform from the woman into the mother. And remember, the mother is a bigger version of the woman in so many ways. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say, Janina, to clock off?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
the
having me.
generosity. Yeah, the generosity of women sharing their stories is so rich for other people. So I really appreciate it. And for those listening, tune in again next week. We'll always have some goodness for you. And I look for lovely little topics and things that we can explore as well to help people know what moves the needle in birth and how to transform your birth. Thanks for listening. See you again. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au? Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.